Welcome to It Factor, the podcast that uncovers the it that make companies stand out in the IT BPM industry.
Today, we're diving into how Pearson is enabling a lifetime of learning.
With Stuart Connor, Pearson's Director of Workforce Skills. He leads Pearson's enterprise learning and skill strategy across the Asia region. And Mark Flores, Country Manager for the Philippines. He is responsible for developing Pearson's business across its portfolio of products and services, ranging from courseware to assessments and qualifications. So what's Pearson's it? Let's find out.
Stuart and Mark, welcome to the It Factor.
Hi.
Hi, thank
Nice
you
to
for
be here.
having us.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So let's get things started. You know, Stuart, Pearson has quite a rich history as a textbook publisher and in the last several years as a language training company. Now, how, in your words, would you describe Pearson's journey and evolution into a lifelong learning company? And how does that shift look like in your products and service offerings today?
Right. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for inviting us here today. So, yeah, you're right. Pretty varied history that Pearson has. It's quite an old company as well, actually. About 180 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Established, I think it was 1844.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
about
1844 as a construction company.
Amazing.
Yeah. If you've ever been to London, the Blackwall Tunnel was built by Pearson in 1844. But, we've been lots of other things in that time. We've been a media company. We were a producer of Baywatch, actually, if you remember that.
The Baywatch.
The Baywatch, the Hoff and everything. We own Madame Tussauds, Financial Times. You'll like this. We actually owned some vineyards in Santa Fe as well. So sold now. But we've been lots of different things over time with a pretty varied portfolio. But about 15 years ago, took a decision that we wanted to be a learning company and all our investments would be focused on education. And that's kind of where we are today. And that gives us a pretty, I'd say, powerful reason to exist. And the reason we exist is to help people to realize and imagine a life of progress through learning. So that's a direct impact that we have. We can see kids in the classroom, how they interact and develop with their guidance from teachers. We see nurses and we see them get accreditations and realize opportunities overseas. We see people in the workforce upskilling and moving forward in their career path. So, helping people in those transitions is quite impactful and a key mission for us. And I think when you think of the sort of world we're in right now with the changes in technology, it's a critical mission. Learning is a critical mission because the pace of change that we're going through,
exactly.
the impacts on our lives through technology, it's kind of unprecedented. I was reading somewhere that AI is now the fastest adopted technology in the history of the planet. Right, so 1 billion users of AI in less than 3 years.
Let's take a step back, Stuart and Mark, because you've described a very lofty ambition, right? For people to take responsibility for this lifelong learning journey. But who do you wish to serve? Is it all people, or is it people in specific phases of their lives?
I would say all people. The term lifelong learning, by definition, simply means that we never stop learning from long before we go to formal school, formal education, to long after we leave formal education. There's always learning that's happening. And the mission of Pearson is to be an instrument for people in whatever stage of their life to empower those people to achieve whatever dream they have. Let's say, you could be a retiree, 65 years old. Doesn't mean you don't have any more dreams, any more ambitions. So whatever those are, the mission of Pearson is to have something that can help you get there.
And if I can just add something to that as well, if you think about sort of formal education and traditional, systems of education, it kind of has a single, one-shot approach that, you have 10 or 12 years of formal education, and that's going to see you through your life in work. And your life in work is going to be like 50, 60, 70 years now. It doesn't make any sense. It's clearly not going to work. So if you believe in the fact that technology is going to stay, then you have to believe in lifelong learning. It's just a reality that we're going to be constantly learning new skills more quickly, more frequently for a longer period.
So you would agree with the mantra, learn, unlearn, relearn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throughout your lifelong learning journey.
Yeah.
I think especially in this day and age where technology is evolving so quickly, by the time you master, let's say, your mobile phone, an upgrade has happened in the OS, and it's a whole new ball game again, all over again.
They say that the half-life of technical skills is 2.5 years. It feels way shorter, don't you think so?
Yeah, I can't even remember, what I was trying to figure out 2.5 years ago, right? So, I wanted to share something. I once said in a room full of university deans and owners that it doesn't matter what you majored in college anymore, because we're now in a much faster paced learning mode. So I imagine you would agree with that statement.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think every role, every job that you can think of is going to be impacted by technology to some degree. We're all going to be technology workers to some extent. And given, as we said, the half-life of technology skills is changing and decreasing so rapidly, clearly we're going to need to keep
so how
relearning
does a company like Pearson keep up? We've talked about accelerated technology. How do you keep up in updating, the programs, the content of what you choose to, impart to all your learners?
The focus of Pearson, because we're not an AI company, we're not a technology company. As Stuart said, we're a learning company. Call it going back to the basics. What skills do you need in order to navigate this world where AI can replace your job 6 months from now? So how do you stay relevant? That's where Pearson focuses its research on. What are those skills that we call them future proof? What skills are relevant today and will remain relevant, let's say 10 years from now, given the fast pace of all this technology, job roles are changing and all that. So we focus on the development and the measurement and the validation of those essential relevant skills. In a blanket term, they're basically the soft skills. Yeah. The skills that differentiate a human from AI. Just off the top of my head, empathy. Even the most intelligent AI will never be able to empathize, let's say, with a frustrated customer. So it's those skills, that ability to listen and understand and put yourself in the shoes of your customer. Those are the skills that will remain relevant. Yeah, maybe 20, 30 years from now.
I think amongst those soft skills, we're often kind of trying to contend like, what is the most important top skill? What are the top 5 soft skills that are needed for particular roles? But I think, to your point, Jack, the audience we serve is not just enterprise. It's really broad. If we look at lifelong learning, what is one core human skill that no matter how far ahead you look is going to be necessary, given how the world around us is changing? I think we would say learning agility, the ability to learn. Yeah, learn to learn, how to learn. Because, and to your point, how does this inform the way we approach products and services? The current ways of learning in the traditional education system or even in enterprise learning, there's a pretty significant mismatch with the learning science of how you learn effectively. So I think, that is a core skill. We've got to encourage people to learn, help them to be able to learn effectively, and make sure there is investment in that.
That's a very important topic, and I think we can go back to that a little bit. But right now, I want to talk about what Pearson's doing in the Philippines. So, Mark, how many years has Pearson been in the country, and what are some of the products that have been most successful? And why is the Philippines a key market for Pearson?
Pearson's been officially in the Philippines since around the early 2000s. For the most part, if you go to the academe, people know Pearson as a publisher, textbook publisher. But if you go to the BPO space, people know Pearson as a language assessment company, depending on which market you're looking at. Now, having said that, those actually are the two most successful lines of business that Pearson has had in the Philippines. In the academe, at least the traditional academics would look for Pearson resources by name. And in the language assessment piece, we're very popular in this industry, the BPO industry, for our language assessment. And in what we call the high stakes English testing market. So this is the market for English tests that are used for visa applications abroad. We are a close number 2 to the market leader, which has been around easily 20, 30 years before us. So yeah, those are the two most successful lines of business for us.
What do you think makes Pearson's approach distinctive compared to other learning platforms?
Thinking about our approach to technology, we do believe in the power of technology to improve learning experiences. Okay. But if I'm completely honest, we are sort of at the beginning of an AI evolution in how we learn using these technologies. So if I give you an example in the corporate world, the way that you or I sort of learn new skills is probably quite similar. We will take time out of the workplace to focus our studies, join a course, a classroom, virtual classroom, LMS, that kind of thing. We might take 30 minutes watching a video, being involved in a course, and there'll be a multiple choice question test at the end of it to check your understanding. And that's how we are learning new skills. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's provably ineffective as a learning approach, right? So the science tells us that within, I think it's 2 days of completing an online learning course, we can only recall 30% of the content. And after a week, we can only recall 10% of the content. It doesn't work. So our approach is to say, hey, we need to be doing something differently. We can't use the paradigm of the past for the future. And the approach we're taking, we're kind of calling it in the flow of work. So learning in the flow of work. And that concept is something that we're starting to apply into our sort of learning design and our learning tools.
Does that have something to do with the younger generation's attention span? All the screen time that these younger generations have. Has that impacted your analysis of how we optimize learning?
I think that's a really good question. Honest answer, I don't know. But this whole concept of the flow of learning is something that is quite new, right? We're using technology to actually help you learn as you are doing activities. Now, this is something that actually we have got data on in the higher education space. So we've been using these types of technologies in universities for about 18 months. And the data that we're getting out of that at the moment is saying there's something like a 7.5% sort of uplift in performance and engagement where they're using these in the flow type of technologies. 85% of students are saying that they got the grades that they were targeting or higher. So we're seeing really good data coming out of higher education space. But in the world of work, these kind of technologies are not currently in use. We're using sort of, as I said, like MOOCs and LMSs that are disconnected from the way we actually work. So what we're trying to do now is just put that connection in place so we can more ambiently see how people learning are applying what they're learning in the flow of the jobs that they do.
Okay, let's continue on that train of thought, right? But bring it closer to home. Many people in the IT BPM industry, past couple of years now, have worried about job disruption and that AI will take away my jobs. Now, from your perspective, what real changes have you observed in how some of these work types and job roles are being redesigned? And what are some of these new opportunities that you see emerging? And how does your own strategy as Pearson align with that? That's 2 or 3 questions in one.
Okay, well, I'll have a crack at the first part of that. So history tells us, right, with every industrial revolution, there is a leap forward in technology, and often that leads to some kind of displacement in the workforce and displacement of jobs. So in that regard, what we're seeing with AI is not that new as a new technology, but it's happening right now, especially in knowledge work. We're seeing fundamental disruption and change into the sort of the DNA of the work and the tasks that people do. So what is that change that we see through technology? It's automation and augmentation, like 2 main areas where AI is changing the work that we do. Now, the automation piece is the one that's, to your point, quite concerning for people who work in BPO industry. You take a relevant example like the customer service agent role. We predict that role is going to be something like 55% impacted through task augmentation and task automation over the next 5 years. And it's happening now, right? Happening now. But over the next 5 years, about 55% impact. People tend to focus on the automation part. And that's the scary part. From an employee level, that's, that's the rise of the robots and rise of the machines and things like that. And from a corporate level, it's, cost efficiencies and savings. But there is a real human cost to automation. Absolutely. Although we're kind of tech optimists, make no mistake, like, there's no positive AI outcome if all AI is going to do is automate people's jobs,
Right.
Automate them out of jobs. So we do not want that to happen. But what often gets missed is that alongside automation, there is augmentation. So rather than focusing on the 10% of, the workforce that's going to be automated, let's focus on the 90% that can be augmented through the use of technology in their role. And that's kind of where our focus is and where optimism it lies.
So from what you're saying, Stuart, you do believe, even in the long run, that there is going to be a role for human at the core of most job roles.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk about human in the loop, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the future-proof skills, the soft skills. I think the fear comes out of maybe a lack of sufficient understanding of what role AI is supposed to play in this world. like Stuart said, if you're focused on automation, then yes, you'll be terrified that in a year's time you'll be out of a job. But if you realize that somebody needs to be managing that technology, somebody needs to be controlling the AI, somebody needs to be monitoring, validating, is the AI, let's say, talk about generative AI. You can ask AI to draft, let's say, your speech. But at the end of the day, you need to validate, is that the right output that you had in mind? So I think the focus of the industry, well, the focus of Pearson in all of this is to look at those skills. What are those skills that humans need to have in order to make sure that AI does its job properly? There's an anecdote where, an intelligent house is supposed to do the laundry, do the dishes and all that automatically, so that you can focus on getting creative and all that. But a lot of people have gone the other way.
Mhm.
They let AI do the creative part so they can do those mundane tasks.
Mm.
So at the end of the day, it's how us as humans embrace the technology.
That's a very interesting point. I want to go back to something both of you said regarding soft skills. People have referred to empathy
Mhm.
as uniquely Filipino and our
Yes.
edge in making us the customer experience capital, right, of the world. What other specific skills, in your opinion, do Filipino workers need to build now, especially in this transformative stage of tech? Across language, across human or AI capabilities, so these Filipino workers can transition to higher value and knowledge based roles.
My view on this is the things that people value about the workforce in the Philippines today will continue to be the same in the future. So the points you made around, advanced English communication skills, definitely empathy and cultural social intelligence, strong service orientation, and digital literacy. All of those things can be obviously prioritized, but I think they'll be augmented through the use of technology and learning systems. So when we talk about, the Philippines as a destination for customer excellence, it will be Philippines as the heart of customer excellence with AI. So it's something that actually powers the industry
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
absolutely has nothing to do with replacement.
So you very much see human plus AI
Yeah.
in the years ahead.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, I think if we look 5 years ahead,
Mhm.
how do you both see AI-enabled, data-driven learning changing the way that Philippine companies develop and measure talent? Again, what are some of these new skill sets that Filipino talents should strive to be known for?
As I said, we don't have a lot of data right now on how AI learning can unlock productivity in the workforce. So I think 5 years hence, we'll start to be collecting that data. We know right now, as I said, that there's really poor skill retention from learning systems. So I think we'll have data that says this is completely different. How this actually looks in practice, I suspect, will be three main areas. We will have continuous personalized learning. So if you can imagine a situation where you have like an AI coach stays with you in your career with a company. It's helping you carry out your tasks. It's advising you, providing you feedback. It's kind of capturing data based on your interactions. So that's one. The second part of that is that companies and talent teams will have these skill inventories. So based on those interactions that people are having through the learning and the application of skills, they'll be catching this data on skills and using that to see what their coverage is of talent in their organization. And then the third part is external to that. These skills will be connected to a wider view on changing labor market landscape, the skills that are needed to do the work in the industry or the roles that you're in. And it will be sort of feeding back and sort of saying, hey, well, based on your skill inventory and your skills map and the tasks you're going to need, here's a learning pathway. So that will be an automated sort of predictive talent development pathway.
Yeah. In terms of you're asking, what skills should Filipinos strive to be known for? So 2025, we looked at all the job placement ads in the US across different industries. And there are 10 skills that kept showing up. Read through the list. Communication skills is at the very top of that list. So it's communication, not just, being fluent in speaking, but having the right comprehension to have a real conversation. And then there's teamwork, collaboration, problem solving, solution orientation, enthusiasm, quick thinking, attention to detail, learning to learn, as Stuart mentioned earlier, and empathy. If you notice, none of these are technical skills. So regardless of industry, these skills matter to employers, not just in the US, but globally. And putting that in the context of AI-driven learning, imagine if you had, let's say, a simulated customer that comes to you with a concern, and then the AI is adaptive. That virtual customer's behavior changes according to the way you respond. So that as a training tool sort of encompasses all of these skills, doesn't isolate them. You learn them in a real world setting. And then, of course, at the end of that exercise, you have your evaluation and tells you which points you did well, which parts need some improvement. I think, looking 5 years into the future, well, at least I hope that is going to be more of the norm, where people use AI to learn how to make the most of their human skills.
I'm really glad you mentioned those soft skills,
Yeah.
Mark, because I'll give you some of our data, although it's anecdotal. Only between 10 to 15% of job seekers that are interviewed get hired. And, one of the things that we try to do is push that conversion rate up. And what the reasons attributed for that low conversion rate are many of the skills that Mark mentioned. Comprehension, critical thinking, problem solving, communication. And then if I could just add my favorite, leadership.
Yes.
Which is going to be the subject of another podcast, I think. But I guess in that context, how does Pearson see its responsibility as a brand and as a partner? And how is this, how do we get this surfaced in the initiatives that you're driving in the Philippines?
We're sort of at the beginning of this, but already we are, we're engaging partners here in the Philippines who can help us get in touch with entities like TESDA, or CHED. We're focusing again on the skills development. We have these vocational learning courses that are bite-sized. Okay? You don't need to sit through a 2-year diploma program. And then we have credentialing that will validate your learning along the way. So you learn if you're taking, let's say, a 4-year bachelor degree. You don't need to go through the whole 4 years to get a credential. When you reach certain milestones that can attest that you have a certain amount of or a certain skill set that can be useful for an employer, then you get a credential for that. Our initiatives are more towards that skill development, of course, proper measurement of skills and validation of skills learned, so that as early as possible, the learner can not only get a sense of accomplishment, but actually make something out of that.
Another kind of initiative that we have that's related to that. And maybe something you mentioned earlier about, in 5 years' time, but actually happening now is a service that we launched a few months ago, actually, with Microsoft called Communication Coach, focused on the kind of skills, the soft skills that we're talking about, and applied in the flow of work. So the way that it works is you're on a Microsoft, Teams call, Teams meeting, something like that. At the end of the call, you get a learning card in your chat box. Sort of says, "Hey, good job. You really nailed that. You covered the main points of the meeting. However, you use some quite technical vocabulary or idiomatic language, and maybe your meaning wasn't fully understood by the audience. So next time, you could try these types of expressions to improve the clarity of your communication." And then you can actually dip in and practice that right there and then with an AI coach in a safe space, in a practice space. You can role play that scenario and practice that expression. So that is an example of learning in the flow of work. It works well if you are a native speaker. It works equally well if you're a non-native speaker. And it will just kind of index on things like pronunciation and intelligibility if you're a non-native speaker. But that's, our first foray into learning in the flow of work in an enterprise context. And it's coming at it somewhat from a language dimension where those soft skills apply. But if you think about it, it could be applied in any context. All you need is the domain knowledge. If it's, insurance underwriting or finance or customer service, you just feed the machine with that domain knowledge and train it, and then you can interact with it. But it's that concept of being able to ambiently catch those signals of skills and then feed that back into your sort of development path in your career that's really interesting. And early days, but interested to see how the data plays out on that.
Thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up, what's really been a very illuminating conversation with both of you. I have a question for the both of you. For the business leaders that are listening to us right now, what is the one practical step that you can recommend so that they can start closing this AI learning gap while doubling down on the uniquely human strengths and advantages of the Filipino talent? Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, profound question. But I think the one thing that business leaders need to embrace is that not only is AI and technology here to stay, but it's not the enemy. It's not a threat. Like any technology, by design, it's meant to help. Now, it's up to the human factor whether that's going to happen or not. Take, for example, nuclear energy. When nuclear energy was first discovered and harnessed, the intention was for it to be used as a source of energy. But then man came in and weaponized it. So at the end of the day, technology can be good depending on how the business leaders would embrace it and how they would incorporate that into their organization. And again, just being mindful of what are the things that make us inherently and uniquely human. What are the things that AI can never replace in a human? And then focus on that, on developing that part of your workforce.
I think, I don't know if you saw this, Jack, but Pearson published a piece of research just a few weeks ago at Davos. It's called Mind the Learning Gap. And I'd say the one thing leaders should do is go and read that document. It's really interesting. A few things that spring to mind from that. It talks about the unrealized potential of AI to unlock productivity. It's not about automation unlock. It's about augmentation unlock. And it says something like, in the US alone, there's a potential of unlocking $4.4 trillion of economic value, 4.4 to 6.6, through augmentation of your workforce. So in that report, there is a framework called Deep that's there to share with HR leaders and to think about how they can implement AI learning in their workforces. And DEEP stands for diagnose, embed, evaluate, and prioritize. So kind of the steps would be, firstly, have a look at your workforce and understand what tasks can be augmented through AI. Understand what skills you have, see where the capability gaps are, and use this information to plot a kind of a learning path. And so, finally, it's the idea that AI for learning is not a cost center. It's actually a strategic investment in the workforce. And that's going to unlock productivity for your business.
Not a cost or a nice to have, but a business imperative. I love the name, Mind the Learning Gap. Quite playful, and something I'll need to end reading.
Can I do that and sort of click here or something?
Stuart and Mark, thank you again for spending a good part of your afternoon, and thank you very much for taking this immense responsibility on. Talent supply, addressing that gap, is a paramount part of what the ITBPM industry needs and what IBPAP's own priority, one of our main priorities in our roadmap. So thanks again for your support and commitment to the industry.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
AI is moving faster than any technology in history. But the real power isn't the tech, it's the minds that use it. AI-augmented workers are poised to add trillions to the global economy. But here's the catch. The promise isn't automatic. Despite all the hype and heavy investment, productivity has stalled. Why? What's missing? Learning that keeps up with AI. Our research reveals a growing gap. Technology is accelerating, but people need support to match the pace. When learning catches up, AI's potential becomes reality. Through augmentation, not automation, not replacing people, but making them better at what they do. To keep pace, learning must move as fast as AI. That's why Pearson developed the Deep Learning Framework. Diagnose the work to guide smart augmentation. Embed learning in the flow of work. Evaluate what truly drives performance. And prioritize learning, not as a nice-to-have, but as an essential growth strategy. Because in the age of AI, the winners won't just adopt new tech. They'll build learning into their culture. They won't just keep up, they'll lead.
We're very excited for our continued collaboration with Pearson in providing greater access to workforce upskilling opportunities. This includes advancement in language, technology, and other essential skill areas, ensuring that professionals will remain relevant and competitive in today's fast-changing market.
For us, the differentiation of Pearson is their focus on practical, measurable outcome rather than theoretical knowledge. What excites us the most right now is their new workforce skilling suite. It's not just another set of courses. It's a dynamic way of helping local enterprise teams to continuously level up. This workforce skilling suite is designed with real-world application in mind, unlike other providers that often take a one-size-fits-all approach. Pearson leverages on data-driven insights to personalize learning. One feedback that we get from a client is that they've significantly improved their team's confidence in using technical English for global client calls within 3 months of using the application. Another client reported that there was a 40% increase in a course completion rate and reduced training fatigue thanks to Pearson's micro-learning modules. In a world that is changing faster than ever, this means giving Filipino workforce the tools not just to keep up, but to stay ahead, confidently, competently, and competitively.
Pearson's approach to education stands out by going beyond content delivery. They consistently utilize AI to personalize learning in real time, emphasizing quality and tailored experiences. Their method connects learning, assessment, and progress into a cohesive process, making education meaningful not only for individuals but for the entire organizations as well.
Make learning your legacy. Mind the learning gap. Read the report to unlock AI's productivity promise.
And that's it for today with It Factor. Thank you for tuning in with us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe in our channel and follow IBPAP on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Till next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep finding the it that sets you apart.